Hi there, we're coming to a close of 2021, so I thought about making a video to review the big things that happened in China this year. And so I want to give you my highlights. I want to tell you the challenges that China had, the crises, what achievements that were happening, but also the goals that China has set for itself for the next years to come. Very interesting to look back always in time and see what really happened in a country where everybody was not making sense of it anymore in 2021. If you haven't subscribed to my video yet, I would really appreciate if you do so, because I'm almost at 50,000 followers, and that was kind of my goal that I set for myself. So if I could do that before Christmas would be fantastic. If not, never mind, I can wait another month, it's not a big issue. But hope you like this video, and welcome to this week's Pascal's China Lens. 2021, what a year has it been for China. I mean, crazy information and data that we got, and messages and articles out of China. I mean, every day, every week, it was like, wow, what are Chinese doing? I mean, this is madness, is what many wrote. And I call it the big cleanup plan, or big cleanup year of China. And while we and the rest of the world were so busy with COVID-19 and getting back on our feet, China took the moment to clean up its house, to prevent more problems to escalate, and also to look at how the future could look and be prepared for it. Now, I would like to give you my highlights of 2021. Just go back in time a little bit and tell you what I see that really happened in China. To do that, I would like to start in 2020, in December, a year ago, where I made 6 videos on YouTube. It was very early days for me on YouTube, and didn't have a lot of followers back then, less than 1,000. I didn't have a lot of views on my videos, as you can see here. But I spoke about the fact that a certain trends, societal trends, business trends, innovation trends, political trends, all these trends were going to come in 2021. And if you look today, what we see is that we could have predicted many of the things that happened. So I invite you to go and watch back those videos if you want. Now, if we start with 2021 challenges, what should we talk about? Of course, the geopolitical. I mean, specifically in the US, what we didn't expect was that Biden was actually going to continue the exact same policy and confrontational attitude as Trump did before him. Wasn't much change. In Alaska, it was very clear that the US was not going to change its way of talking about China, was going to continue blaming China, telling China what to do. But the difference there is that for the very first time, internationally, China was responding in the same confrontational way. So that changed a little bit the way that the relationship happened. And then the EU, end of 2020, there was the CAI deal, C-A-I deal, that Merkel still made happen. And so it looked like Europe or EU or the European Commission was going to work with China, many economic things, but over the year it completely changed as well. It was about human rights much more than it was before even. And then it also became about now seeing China as a competitor more than a partner or an opportunity. And so this is a big change for Europe as well, who was stuck between America and China and has to define themselves their own identity. But it's clear with their new Global Gateway Plan that is very recent, as a response on the Belt and Road Initiative of China, that Europe is not looking at China as a partner as they used to a year ago. And then, of course, military, there was a lot of things. I mean, think about AUKUS, a UK-US, so the Australian, UK and US partnership, where nuclear submarines are being delivered to, or will be delivered to, Australia. It's creating very different tensions in the South China Sea. Of course, we have the issue of Taiwan, really a time bomb, you could say. And then on top of that, military, the US went away from Afghanistan, and a lot of their troops, a lot of their military assets went direction Asia. So there's a big military change into the tensions and the potential wars that could happen in the world in the future. And then just a few weeks ago, there was a discussion between Biden and Xi Jinping on the highest level. First time I made a video about that, which could have said, this is the first time you could call about a reboot. It's kind of like a silver lining that suddenly those two biggest presidents, I mean the highest presidents in the world, the most important people in the world, are talking on a quite friendly level, equal level, win-win. That's kind of the attitude it was. But a few days later, it all went back to zero almost. So it hasn't been a real reboot. But that is what the situation was in 2021. Now, if we look at the crises that China had to tackle this year, huge crisis. The biggest one in my view, and you might disagree with that, is that the census clearly showed that China has a shrinking working population. And the older people are getting very old, and unless they want to end up in a situation like Japan, they're going to have to do something about it. So innovation, technology, robotization, automation, all these things have to help China become more productive, but they've been trying to do that for a decade. It's really hard, but now they need to speed up, and they really need to figure out a way to tackle this huge problem. And then in the summer we had the energy crisis. This was globally a problem everywhere in the world, but China has a huge energy crisis for the very first time. It had to do with a lot of things about going carbon neutral in the future, meaning they had to change to renewable, but not everything was connected yet. And so big issues, realities, people didn't have enough energy, factories could not produce, factories were asked to stop producing. I mean, this was a huge issue to tackle. Now, right now it looks better, but they reopened coal mines to solve that temporary problem as well. And then since September, I made a video last week about the Evergrande crisis. I mean, people in the world were saying, okay, after 30 years of miracle of China, here's the proof. There's this bubble that is bursting. It has bursted. Evergrande is the first domino that is fall, and a lot of others will fall as well, which means that in reality, there's a financial crisis coming up. And this could go global, but the China miracle just ended. That's what many people wrote about. My video was talking about how China is going to solve it, but that's a different story. I think the biggest issue that China, or crisis that China is having, whether they believe it's a crisis or not, it's a reality in my view, is that they have a PR problem. And the big issue that China is facing today is that the way that they talk towards their own 1.4 billion Chinese is the same way as they often talk to the rest of the world. And so that means that the rest of the world, when they read these things, they read it as propaganda and something from Beijing and something that is trying to convince you of something that's actually fake. While the Chinese, in their view, they actually see that this is really going on because they're looking more at the actions than the words. And so the PR problem is a huge problem, and China is trying to solve it. They've been much more vocal about how they respond to the world, but it's not always had the effect that they expected. So really an issue, a crisis, you could say, a PR crisis in China. Now, if you look at the regulations, I think that was the big talk since this summer. It started already more than a year ago with Ant Financial, with fintech regulation and banking regulation, and Jack Ma that suddenly disappeared for a couple of months. It was really about regulation on the financial sector and fintechs in specific. Later on, it was all about anti-monopoly laws or antitrust laws. We saw that Beijing fined companies like Alibaba, Tencent, Meituan, and a lot of them billions of dollars. And so this was, of course, like the whole world was saying, whoa, these big companies which we invested in New York and so on, suddenly are not going to have the same value anymore. So the Chinese miracle, from a technology point of view, maybe it's ending too. And then we had all the crackdowns on data. Think about privacy laws, the PIPL law. Think about the national security law or data protection law. And so this was all about new laws where technology companies were suddenly put into a lot of stress to be able to operate. And when companies like LinkedIn and Yahoo and Fortnite leave China, then everybody was saying like, oh, this is not going to be good for innovation, this is not going to be good for the future, and China is moving inward again. I have a very different opinion on that, because I do believe now this is fueling innovation. And if you look at it, the startup scene in China has never been as bright as it ever has been in the past 10 years. So it's crazy. Everybody wants to do a startup right now in China. And that has a lot to do with those monopolies and those people that abuse data that are not being able to do whatever they want anymore. And then, of course, China was talking about the excesses. I mean, gaming was limited for young people. Bitcoin was forbidden or banned. We had things like gambling, which is now the big focus in Macau and so on. And many other excesses that China, Beijing, was really cracking down on. And so we had the EdTech this summer, where suddenly it had to become non-profits. I mean, there was lots of things. Every week there was like another message of Chinese government is now telling everybody who's in control, and the businesses cannot say anything anymore. We translated that in the West wrongly as if Beijing wants to control the tech scene. Actually, they want to fuel the tech scene by putting in regulation. I made a video about that a year ago, saying that there's going to be a lot more rule of law. And so if you would have watched this video a year ago, you probably would have seen that this would have come. And a lot of things were in the making. And I even talked about things like civil law and patent law, which we haven't even talked about in the West. But to me, this is all about China cleaning up. And they're cleaning up because they want to focus on the future. Now, what are the achievements that China had in 2021? Because I think it's great to look at the challenges, but I also think we have to look at what they achieved. And so 2021 was an interesting year. Most important, of course, and this is what everybody in China will tell you, it's 100 years of Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party, or Communist Party of China. And so what that means is that suddenly everybody was celebrating in China. I mean, the first 30 years of these 100 years were really about the struggle with foreign invaders. Think about Japan and a lot of other countries, but also internally struggle. This was a military struggle. It was fighting for survival. And then under Mao, this was an ideological struggle for 30 years as well, almost. And this was really about changing into a more modern society, which in a way, although there was a lot of problems during that period, succeeded to help then Deng Xiaoping, early 80s, to then go to the next 30 years to liberalize or open China for the world, which means that Chinese could now have an economic struggle, meaning they could work really hard, and if they did, they could become very rich and very wealthy, and that really worked out. And then the last 10 years of this 100 years is the Xi Jinping era, where Xi Jinping now has, he's the person that really everybody's looking forward to in China to see how the future of China is going to look like. And this is now not so much about quantity, this is more about purpose, it's about common purpose, it's about common prosperity, a lot of things which is about quality rather than quantity. And so this is happening in just 100 years' time, which sounds like a long time, but specifically this is the longest one party being in charge anywhere else in the world. And then of course the Communist Party also created a lot of wealth, specifically the last 40 years. And so today China is a very wealthy country. It's the second largest economy, but also there's a lot of rich people. And so this is really about the Communist Party in this last 40 years that really has shown the way towards prosperity. Most important in my view that happened this year is that the trust level of Chinese, specifically in the way that China and Beijing coped with COVID-19, but other measures as well, is very, very high. And today, the last weeks, there have been some new reports coming out talking about more than 90%, up to 98% of satisfaction. Now, a lot of people will say, don't believe these numbers. People in China, if you ask them, do you trust the government? Nobody would dare to say no. But if that would be the case, then it wouldn't be at 93 or 95 or 98%, it would be at 100%. The reality is, and that's with the friends I have in China, most of them, 9 out of 10, are pretty supportive of what the Chinese government, the CPC, has done in the past years, specifically the last 2 years. And then something interesting, which we don't talk a lot about, is that China has opened a number of new markets in the last year. And these new markets, driven by Beijing very often, are actually changing China for a more quality life. Think about the Beijing Stock Exchange, which is really to promote SMEs, so small and mid-sized companies. It's something that Xi Jinping really opened and wanted to help this innovation fuel bottom up. Then there's the carbon market in Shanghai, where carbon trading is now happening with more than 2,000 energy companies. So very interesting, because that's how they will reach CO2 neutrality over time. There's a data market in China as well, in Shanghai, where people can exchange data, which is great because this will help some algorithms to actually become even more powerful and smart and create the smart China that China wants to be. And then in the south of China, you have in Hong Kong the M-Bridge, which is all about the central bank's digital currency that is now being traded. And if you look at that, the whole Asia is starting to trade this digital currency, is starting to announce and release digital currencies. And so Asia is becoming stronger because of this digital currency, and this is very, very recent. But there's a lot of new markets where Beijing is involved, where state banks are involved, and so it's quite interesting to see how China is taking a different attitude. And this is all driven by Beijing. Now, the other thing when we look at it is the domestic. The achievements domestically within China, in my view, still the biggest one is COVID-19. China was at zero tolerance policies for the whole year, for 2 years now almost, and it has kept that way. It means that there's actually no COVID in China, except when there's an outbreak, it immediately stops. And so the numbers compared to any country in the West is just, I mean, we can't even talk about the difference. I mean, it's almost zero to a lot. I mean, I'm from Belgium, and we're talking about more than 20,000 infections every day now. And so in China, we're talking about dozens, maybe 100. And so this is very different, specifically for this large country. And so this is a big, big achievement. No other country in the world has been able to do it. Now, the other thing is the end of poverty. This was also driven by Beijing, but we saw very much in 2021 that the extreme poverty in China, officially, formally, is gone. I mean, there's still a lot of poor people, but the extreme poverty, meaning people that really have to live on less than $2 a day, that's gone. And so people can now have enough food, at least, to survive, which is a basic need for everyone, for the whole population. One of the things I really like about what happened in 2021 is 5G. Already in 2020, China had 1 million 5G base stations installed, and or 700,000 it was at that time. Today it's almost doubled. It's 1,700,000, the last number I saw, which means that there's already more than 300 cities with full coverage of 5G and almost 500 million people that have connection with 5G in China today. So China is the most connected place on the planet today when it comes to 5G. And this is not just about faster internet, it's a lot to do with a lot more applications that are used using 5G. It makes China smarter. And so China's took at least 1 to 2 years lead ahead of most countries in the world, specifically larger countries. And then there's the growth. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion on the growth of China, but it looks like the growth of China will be above 6% according to Liu He. So what that means is that China is pretty much above its expectation in growth. But we can expect in the next years that it's going to tumble below 6%. And China slowly will have a slower growth, which is not something that China has a big problem with, because Xi Jinping really wants to have a healthy environment rather than just a fast-growing one. But 6% is what they expected, what they predicted in March this year. By the end of this year, it looks that it's more than 6%. So these are the achievements nationally. If we look internationally, it's pretty interesting to see how China has positioned itself into Asia over the past year. And specifically with the RCEP deal and the Trans-Pacific deal that is happening as well, or comprehensive TTP, it's really all about connecting more with the Asian countries. We see it with the central bank digital currency, which I explained about, but there's also a lot of tax deals happening. And so it's clear that China is positioning itself as the growth engine for Asia. And I think the Asian century is started in 2021. Now on trade, when we look at that, I mean, China has exploded in trade. I mean, it's done very well. There's a trade surplus with the US. Even in November, it was way higher than a year ago. And so China is doing good at trade. So it's not under pressure when it comes to export. Then, of course, we have CO2 or carbon. I mean, China has committed to carbon neutrality by 2060 and peaking at 2030. They've done that more than a year ago, September last year, at the General Assembly of the United Nations. Later on, they said they would not open any more coal plants outside China. And just at COP26 last month, China and the US came to an agreement to contain the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So what that means is that this is really historical, because for the first time China is really starting to take commitments. I mean, they've done it for many years, but now they're doing it really on paper and making actions, and they have to make sure that they reach these deals. So they're accountable for it. And then what I really like as a story is their space efforts and achievements. I mean, they landed on Mars with a rover, so that's just like the US did, and so this is really cool. But besides that, they now have an international space agency of their own. And the first woman in space doing a spacewalk was a Chinese, just happened last month. And so this is interesting. Why? Because the other International Space Agency, which was from ESA, European Space Agency, is now more than 20 years old. And what that means is that they're starting to fade away, or they're breaking down parts. And so this is an old space station, while China has sent out a bright new one. And so it could be in 5 to 10 years from now that the only International Space Agency in the world that is active is the Chinese one. And so we have to think about that when we think about cooperating with China when it comes to space exploration. Now, the third thing I want to talk about, and the last one, is about the goals of China from now on. And I think China has started to set some real goals in 2021, which they always do. Every 5 years they do that. And the first one was the 14th five-year plan that happened in March this year. What you saw there is that they're starting to go more for quality than for quantity. And so one of the key things there is the modernization. China has committed to 1.4 trillion US dollars into the digital infrastructure, but it's all about making everything smarter, more modern, robotized, automated, efficient. It's really about the processes that have to be better. And so this is really about optimization. And China needs to get its productivity level up, and that's what it's about. And this is related to the census problem of too many older Chinese and not enough working people. So they have to go into modernization. So we can expect miracles from China in the next 5 years to come. The big focus this year has been on research, and I say specifically research, not R&D, because China's always been better in the D than in the R, meaning in development and in research. And so because they're very pragmatic and they're always looking at solutions for the market. But the reality is today, it's all about going deep and going into research. AI, it's about quantum, it's about chips, of course, it's about things like genetic and biotech, about neuroscience, space exploration, blockchain, vaccines. I mean, all these things, deep sea exploration. I mean, there's a lot of things that China wants to become the leader in innovation through research. Not just by applying it into society, but also finding out and innovating into that environment. And so the budget for research comparatively within the R&D budget has to go up. And that was within the 5-year plan back in March. And then the other thing is, of course, sustainability, going green, renewables. I mean, this is related to the deals with the world, but China also wants to become a lot more sustainable. And so there's real targets on that as well. And so we're going to see a lot of things even happening the next years. I think in the next 2-3 years, a big change will happen, because that's when these ultra high voltage lines will connect the renewable sources of wind and solar power with the east of China, because these renewables are in the west, it's 2,000 kilometers away, and in a couple of years from now they're all going to get connected, and so Shanghai and other cities will have a lot more renewables. And then there's the inclusion plan within the 14th five-year plan, and that has really to do about helping the poor, the migrants, to get easier hukou. This is like a residence permit into third and fourth tier cities, and really helping them to be part of the prosperity of China. And so there's a lot of clear goals that China has set in order to help the society to move up to a higher level, just like the West. Now, the other thing has to be on innovation and research, as I said already. And it's very clear, I said that a year ago in my trends as well, China is building smart industries. I mean, this is about smart cities, it's about smart health, it's about smart agriculture, of course smart mobility, but it's also about logistics, it's about a lot of industries that are becoming smarter and smarter and smarter. And so I believe in the next years to come, we're going to see a lot of trends coming out of China where they are actually showing or setting the standard for smart, whatever it is, whatever industry it is, and that we're going to start copying China. That's my personal view. But you don't have to believe me, I'm just convinced of it. The other thing has to do with chips. I mean, the big war on chips is a big war. And China is, according to Western media, like 10, 20 years behind. I don't buy it. for me, I see China moving so fast in chip development, and not everything is visible because there's so much money available, so many entrepreneurs that want to build chips, so many smart people that came back to China to build these next chips, that I do believe that in the next 5 years we're going to see miracles. And specifically 2022, so next year, I'm expecting to see some articles where China will have reached below 14 nanometer, where the designs of chips is going up to 2 nanometer. And we're going to see every year, we're going to see improvements which are not small steps, but big steps. That's my personal opinion on it. Biotech is an area to watch because I believe that China is putting so much money into research of biotech that maybe in future most of the medicines that we buy, the pharmaceuticals, will come from China simply because they came out with the first new medicine at a very, very good price. And so it's going to be very hard to say no. So we're already seeing that even with mRNA vaccines that have been licensed to the world. So it's not just Pfizer and Moderna building these things or creating these things. China's doing their part too. Now, innovation is something that I'm always watching, and I love that part, but I also like to look at inventions. And China is really starting to go from just pragmatic innovations, applied research, to really basic research, fundamental research. And this is something changing 2020, 2021, but now the big start is there. Everybody wants to go into inventions. Also because it's a way to improve your salary in China. So of course Chinese engineers like that. But it's also showing your commitment to the government, your commitment to the country. And with China becoming more nationalist, I mean, people want to invent stuff to show to Beijing, to show to the whole China how great they are. And so this is going to happen. I mean, we've seen already this artificial sun. We've seen a lot of things happening in quantum, in photonics. I mean, there's a lot of things that not many people talk about. Nuclear. I mean, there's a lot of areas where China is starting to invent stuff. And this is an area definitely to watch. Now, the last thing I would like to say within the goals for the next years and the future that were set in 2021 is really about what we call prosperity. I mean, it's not just about making the rich richer, it's actually to make everybody richer. Now, the interesting data points there is, first of all, that China is becoming the biggest economy in the world. And it was predicted in 2020 that this would be the 2028. So that's in 7 years from now, China would surpass the US. Now, China is probably going to go down in growth in the next years to come. So it might be 2029, 2030, 31. We don't know. But it's within a decade from now. And so that means China within this decade, the next decade, will be the #1 economy in the world. And then on top of it, they really want to do good for the environment in many, many aspects, which means it's not just about more, it's also about better, better, better. And so what we see now is that China is really trying to balance GDP with the health of society, the health of people, the health of the industries. And so this is where all these regulations are happening, and not just in environment, on data, on monopolies, on fintech. It's all to do with having the right balance between health, the environment, and growth of GDP. And so they're putting more effort on the green. And then the most important as well is to see that it's still the rich people that are driving China very much. What that means is that the number of millionaires are going to double in the next 4 years. It's 2 million up to 4 million people. Number of billionaires will reach, number of people in middle class will increase. And so China is really moving up in people that have more money. And if they use it correctly and they give back to society, the people that became rich, then there's actually things that could happen which countries like America have a lot more challenges with because it's an individual decision how much you actually give to the rest of society. It's on charity or donations or whatever you want to do, any project. And so China is what they call focusing very much since a couple of months on common prosperity. And this is from Beijing driven. And a lot of people see this as just some words and some things that are talked about by Xi Jinping and others. And yeah, it's all nice, but it's propaganda is what people say. For me, it's actually very interesting to see. And if we look at what happened in 2021 and see at all the regulation and all the crackdowns and all the crises, how they managed all this, then we know that China is serious about that. And so I think we should really look at it. For me, it's the biggest trend that nobody's looking at. It's the fact that China is trying to figure out a way to help everybody within the middle class and everybody's wealth to go up. And this common prosperity is not just about taking money from the rich, it's about creating a conscious mindset with the people that have used the resources of China and the labor of China to become rich, to actually give back. And so this is a noble task. It's quite nice. It's not like the societal environment or social environment in the West, in Europe, I would say, because it's not about tax progression. This is really about changing people's mindset, and when you became successful, you need to figure out a way to give back. And of course, Beijing will help you to tell you where you should give things back, which is something that the rest of the world would never accept. But in China, it's pretty okay. And so I believe 2021 has been the year of the big cleanup. China has cleaned up a lot of its problems. I mean, when it comes to regulation, when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to corruption, the real estate, I mean, energy problems, they started to really clean up everything in 2021. Why did they do it this year? Well, probably because it was closed and the world wasn't watching, and so they could do this, and everybody was too busy anyhow with their own crisis outside China. But this is really what's going to help China to prepare for the future. And so if we look at next year, 2022, we really see that China is heading towards a new start. You could call it a reboot of China. After 40 years of Deng Xiaoping era and Xi Jinping, where it was all about more and growth and just pragmatic and being efficient through speed, today it's more about this marathon. They started a marathon that will take a long time to get there, but if they all do it together, it looks like they can actually move even faster than anyone else, because there's some common goal set in China today. And so I do believe that 2022 will not be as much as it was in 2021 about crackdowns and forcing and basically telling people what to do or changing the environment, but creating opportunity for the future. We'll see what happens, and maybe I'll make a video on the trends of 2022 very soon.